Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
The OnCourse podcast is an IVM production, and if you enjoy listening to our show, you should definitely check out Simplified. Hosted by Chuck, Narain, and Shrikhet, Simplified takes big complex issues and simplifies it to help you appear smarter at parties.
You're listening to the OnCourse podcast.
Hi everyone, OnCourse is a creative and alternate education company that aims to bridge the gap between formal classroom education and real-world skills. We offer a range of programs from short skill-based courses to test preparation to application assistance for those looking to study abroad. My name is Akhil Daswani. I'm the COO and co-founder of OnCourse. And on today's show, we have with us Shreya, who's going to be discussing careers in journalism. Hi, Shreya.
Hi, Akhil.
How's it going?
It's going okay.
So, Shreya, just to get started, right, what would you say journalism actually is?
So journalism is essentially a form of communication which focuses on disseminating information either through the written or spoken word. So it's typically collecting facts and transmitting it to an audience who may or may not know about an issue. People often confuse journalism with only serious news reporting, but journalism actually encompasses a lot of different types. It includes broadcast, communications, foreign correspondence, freelance, investigative journalism, just to name a few.
Awesome. So if someone's looking to go into journalism, right, what kind of degree should they be looking at?
They should look at a bachelor's degree in journalism or mass communications. That would be the best door.
And what's the difference between those two degrees?
Mass communication generally deals with conveying or transmitting the information to the general population through media like radio, newspapers, magazines, and so on. Whereas journalism is the actual process of compiling and transmitting the same information.
Awesome. So what is a career in journalism really all about?
It's all about the passion for writing or speaking. So if you have a point which you really want to put across to different people, or if you have a voice which you feel isn't heard amongst a multitude of other voices, journalism kind of gives you the opportunity to let yourself be heard.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So tell me, like, obviously there's been a lot of like talk about electronic media sort of coming in. Is that going to make like journalism redundant to some extent, or do you think there's going to be a shift in journalism?
Yeah, I think journalism is a very fluid field. So initially it started off with the spoken word, then it went on to newspapers and periodicals, and now we have an influx of social media taking over everything. So we've seen a change as journalism has progressed through the years, and I'm sure it probably will go into avenues which we aren't even sure of yet. But I don't think that any kind of media would be made redundant, because there's always an audience for something. It's just that the audiences change. Some audiences gravitate towards social media. For example, the youth of today would probably try to read the news on, bites on Snapchat or
Twitter,
Instagram.
Right? I think that's the new thing.
Yeah, Twitter's really become the new rage, and I think that's great as long as I think information is given to people. It doesn't really matter what form it goes in, but the important thing is that it's a dynamic field, so as long as people are aware of what's going on, that's the essence of journalism.
Awesome. In terms of kids who are starting out early, who really have an interest in writing or in forms of journalism, and their parents are trying to discover this sort of passion in them, what are some things that you would recommend for parents or for younger kids to do to sort of build on this?
The first thing I'd advise anyone to do is read. I know that it's a skill which is quite neglected nowadays, because I think there are so many other ways to get information.
And would you say the Kindle is as good as read as a real book?
Honestly, I'm very old school in my thoughts, so I don't like the Kindle at all. I prefer the feel of a book and the smell of the book, actually, but that's just me. So I think even if a child is sitting down with a Kindle for an hour a day, and as long as he's reading, as I said, I think that's more important. But I don't think books can be replaced, because the kind of, to go a little off topic and sound a little romantic, but I think the feel of a book is something else, and it just makes you want to read a little more. But coming back to the point, I think reading is really important. It not only does it build your imagination, but it also builds your wordplay, and it builds the way you think, and it teaches you like a creative way to look at things, and gives you an opportunity to look at different cultures in a different way, which is really important, I feel. So for anyone who's interested even a little bit in writing and things like that, I think reading is the first building block to that, and any kind of reading, right? Like, it's not necessary to be reading classics only. As long as you're reading anything that builds your interest, that means you're honing your skills.
So
in a
those romantic
particular way.
novels or the graphic novels are all okay?
Well, I think that is okay, but to make sure, as any journalist would also like to be holistic and well-rounded, you could read that, but I feel you should also read things which have more universal themes, like love, hatred, power, revenge. Themes like that kind of build your bent of mind towards writing as well. So I feel nothing can dilute the importance of reading. The second thing they should do is start maintaining a notebook. It doesn't have to be a formal blog. It doesn't have to be a published article, but as long as you're keeping a notebook with all their ideas, and it could be literally anything, like you're walking out, you're walking your dog outside and you see a couple fighting, and what is your thought about that, and just write it down. Like, you never know where the seed of an idea will come from, and it also hones your powers of observation, which is very, very key for a journalist.
That's actually really good advice, because I think at least at OnCourse we see a lot of young kids with really good writing skills, and we noticed that some of them are actually starting to get published, right? So is this a theme that you're seeing also?
Absolutely. I think also the opportunities are vast now. There are many, many ways to get published. It's not how it used to be, that you have to go through a whole array of, bureaucracy and kind of levels, and having connections and having someone who publish what you do. There are ways to do it now. You can self-publish, you can create a blog, you can, with the whole influx of Instagram and Tumblr and Twitter and WordPress, there are so many ways to get heard.
Great. So coming back to the job search for, graduates going into journalism, what are some of the things that, these magazines or these companies are really looking at when they're hiring these people?
Right. So a bachelor's degree in journalism would be your best foot in the door. But having said that, there are a lot of people who are interested in writing but have not formally pursued a degree in journalism. It's not to say that you wouldn't get a job in that, but it's always easier if you've had some kind of experience or some kind of formal training in journalism. So every magazine is first and foremost looking for someone with an eye for news. As I said, powers of observation are very key to a journalist. And
so how would they gauge that in an interview?
Your general knowledge should be extremely high. You should be aware of current affairs. And you should, more than that, you should have your own hook on what is going on. So it's not enough to just rattle out what the news of the day is. It's more important to have an opinion on it and your take on it.
Very interesting. So, at this point, I guess journalism's still a very, interesting career for a lot of people. Would you advise people to work with the bigger magazines, or would you recommend they start with a smaller shop and then try to work their way towards the bigger magazines?
I would say start where you are and do what you can, because getting a job with a big magazine is not always easy. Unfortunately, it still depends a lot on connections and who you know and things like that.
And is it as glamorous as it's made out to be?
Not at all. I think the glamour starts wearing off after a month. It's great to tell someone that, I work with the Times or I work with Vogue or things like that. But what people don't realize is the immense hard work that goes behind it. No story is just born, right? You have to research it methodically. You have to write it down. You have to find enough facts to support what you're saying. No matter what, the genre could be crime, it could be fashion, it could be anything, but there still has to be a lot of evidence behind what you're writing.
Great. So I think we're going to take a short break at this point, and we'll be back in conversation with Shreya.
Every week comes a show where three people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on the IVM Podcast app to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
Hi guys, so we're back. We're in conversation with Shreya talking about careers in journalism. So I think, Shreya, you've given us a really good insight into what it takes to get into the industry. Can you tell us a little bit more of what the industry is really like once you're in?
Once you're in, you'll see that it's a very dynamic field. you'll see that there's so much to learn from everyone, whether it is a veteran or it's a novice. A novice will give you ideas with a fresher insight. A veteran will hone your talent.
What kind of work can someone expect once they're in?
The first thing that you would expect is to do a lot of research, because even before you're allowed to actually publish your thoughts or even voice them, you have to make sure that it's backed up with enough evidence and facts. That's the first thing you learn in journalism. It's not just about your thoughts or a conversation that you're having with a friend or someone you know. It is actually giving that kind of information to people who don't know you. So it has to be backed up with the truth. So the first thing that you learn is to hone the powers of research. And the first thing you learn is to hone your research skills.
Awesome. That's really good insight. So, is it necessary, we get a lot of inquiries about masters in journalism. Do you feel like that's something which is required to really grow in the field of journalism for someone who's already in?
To be honest, yes, because it's not necessary, but it definitely does give you a leg up, because the kind of network that you will be exposed to and the kind of media contacts you'll make during your masters is essential for you to further your career.
I know schools like NYU, Northwestern, USC have really good journalism programs,
Yeah.
but just could you give us an insight into like what they would teach that would really help hone those skills?
So they would have you do coursework in things which are very important, like media ethics and understanding how media can affect the consumer and the dual play, right? How consumer affects media and how media affects consumers. That's something which, if it's taught professionally, sort of sinks in more than just hearing about it or seeing it. To do an internship under the tutelage of some of the professors out there who have so much experience is something which is unparalleled, because it would teach you, it would hone your existing skills for sure.
Awesome. And how would you say the Indian journalism scene is different from, the journalism scene anywhere else in the world? Or do you feel like it's about the same level?
I would say that the Indian journalism scene is sometimes focused a little bit more on sensationalism, which is a drawback which most...
What would you mean by sensationalism?
Sometimes news... And this is not pertaining only to India. These cases happen all across the world. But sometimes our focus on news is less the situation and more the reactions. So a lot of journalism is focused on garnering audience attention for the sake of attention, not for the situation. And that is something which is a major drawback. But having said that, we have some incredible minds who are working to change that, and they do this independently. Sometimes they're not tied in with a news station as such or anything like that, but they publish periodicals, or as we were talking about Twitter and things, it's very easy for journalists who don't respect this form of communication to sort of give out their own ideas independently.
So I know a lot of people who go into journalism come from, the BMM field, like bachelor's in mass media and that sort of stuff. What do they teach in that course that prepares you so well for journalism? So
it's, in a nutshell, it's a little bit of everything. It teaches you all about the different forms of media. So, and in the end, in your third year, you can choose between advertising and journalism to major in. But through the 3 years, you're taught essential skills such as effective communication skills, you're taught public relations, you're taught film studies, you're taught English, you're taught literature. You're taught a little bit of everything which goes into making you a more well-rounded individual for the media. And I think a really good thing that they do is they invite a lot of industry speakers to come and hold seminars or even give you projects to work on, which gives you an insight into what it would be like in the real world.
Awesome. And what's your opinion on internships?
Key. Internships are key because even though you may not get the most amount of work done in that 1 month, just being around the organization which you someday aspire to be in will give you an idea of how it is to work there. As I said, observation is very, very important. So even as an intern, if all you're doing is getting cups of coffee for your boss, the most important thing is you're still around your potential boss. So you can see how their work, how a day in their life is. You can understand how their work day looks like. You can see what kind of meetings they go for, what kind of information they need. You can be invaluable in providing that research to them, which is very, very important. So it's very key to get as many internships as you can before you start working.
Awesome. That's really good advice. And just to sort of sum up, right, what final pieces of advice do you have for any aspiring journalists out there?
One, I would say, is build on your natural talent. So if you feel like you want to write someday, start reading a lot, start writing as much as you can, even if it's not formal. Just keep building up on your natural skills. 2, get a formal education in journalism. So whether it is a bachelor's degree or it is a postgraduate degree or it is a series of internships, build on your repertoire. 3, I would say choose a niche, because it's easy to get drawn into journalism and see that there are so many different aspects to it that you spread yourself out too thin. It's very important to find your niche and decide what you want to do well in. 4, I would say get as many internships as you can, because the kind of education that you get on field is invaluable. And 5, I would say be willing to start small. You don't always have to start off with the biggest news organization or the biggest magazine in the country. But even if it starts from your own blog to becoming something else, that's important as well.
Great. Thank you so much. For all our listeners, if you want to know more, feel free to write into us at info@oncourseglobal.com, or follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or check out our website at www.oncourseglobal.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.